The peaceful fishing community of Kapaya was located on the Hawaiian island of Kauai. When local fisherman Kalani Mahalona set out on his little weathered boat, the sun's golden rays fell on the calm turquoise waters. He had been making a living from fishing for almost 30 years, and the village had become accustomed to his frequent visits. The rustle of palm trees and the hum of the ocean were more familiar than the bustle of the outside world in Kapa, where time seemed to pass more slowly. The village was primarily dependent on fishing and tourism, the latter of which brought in curious tourists, hoping to take in the unspoiled splendor of the Hawaiian coastlines. Kalani had been fishing in these waters without any problems for years. Attacks by sharks were even more uncommon than sightings. Kalani had never had any cause to be afraid of great white sharks, because they were uncommon in these tropical waters. However, something was different that morning. He felt a sense of unease as he cast his nets. The typically clear water appeared darker, as though something was hiding beneath it. The water erupted as Kalani was about to pull up his final catch of the day after hours had passed. The boat rocked violently before he could react as a huge shadow rose from the depths. Larger than any Kalani had ever envisioned, the great white shark crashed into the side of his ship. The creature struck in a rage, its jaws snapping with terrifying accuracy. Despite Kalani's struggles, the ocean quickly turned red. The very waters that the fisherman had known his entire life had claimed him, and he was no longer there. The shark had crushed him before leaving his lifeless body and disappeared into the deep. Kapa was shocked to learn of Kalani's passing. These waters had never seen a shark attack, so losing one of their own, particularly one with Kalani's level of experience, left a lasting wound. At first, the local authorities dismissed it as a single tragic incident, an unfortunate run-in with a rogue predator. However, the explanation didn't sit well with Daniel Mahalona Kalani's son. Daniel, a marine biologist who specialized in shark behavior, had been researching sharks for years. He had traveled across the Pacific for work, but he felt that the waters around Hawaii were safe for both people and sharks. From colder waters, great whites in particular hardly ever traveled this far. Daniel was determined to discover what it was that had brought this person here. Daniel started his investigation after his father's funeral and returned to Kapa. He talked to other fishermen who had been out on the water that day just like his father. The weeks before the attack, according to several, saw an abnormally high number of sharks nearer the coast. A few had even managed to catch a glimpse of big dark shapes beneath their boats. At that point, Daniel's suspicions began to grow. This type of shallow water was not the only place where sharks gathered, and not in such large quantities. The natural equilibrium was altered by something. Daniel made a startling discovery as he dug deeper. He discovered abandoned fishing gear, including hooks and lines intended for something much bigger than catching mahi-mahi or tuna. There were indications of illicit poaching on the gear, similar to what is used by those involved in the shark fin trade. Poachers frequently used bait to entice sharks to kill them for their fins, and then discard the rest of the carcass. The fins, which are considered a delicacy in some parts of the world, could fetch outrageous prices. Daniel was struck with the realization. Great whites and other sharks were attracted to the waters near Kapa because they had been purposefully baited. The ecosystem had been upset by the greedy and careless poachers, endangering the sharks as well as the locals. His father had now paid the price. However, Daniel's investigation grew increasingly risky as he discovered more. He was sorting through the evidence he had gathered late one evening when someone knocked on his door. An unfamiliar man cautioned him to cease his inquiries. Tourism was the village's main source of income, so reports of poaching and shark attacks would ruin their way of life. The message was clear. Daniel would be endangering not only himself but the entire village if he persisted. Faced with this dilemma, Daniel struggled. He knew the truth needed to come out, but he also understood the village's dependence on the ocean and the tourists it brought. The poachers were abusing this delicate balance, and everything could be destroyed if they were caught. However, if nothing were done, more human and shark lives would be in danger. Following a second shark attack a few days later, Daniel made his decision. This time, the victim was a young surfer who had entered the baited waters as a tourist. Despite the surfer's survival, the incident rocked the community, and tales of killer sharks quickly spread. Large swaths of the beach were closed by the authorities under duress, further harming the already precarious local economy. After deciding he could no longer keep quiet, Daniel presented his findings to the environmental organization in his community. He urged them to act after gathering testimony from fishermen who had witnessed suspicious activity and proof of illegal poaching. The agency was initially reluctant due to the potential impact on tourism, but eventually agreed to investigate. The crackdown was swift. Over the following weeks, several poaching vessels were seized and their operators arrested. News of the illegal shark fin trade operation spread, but Daniel and the environmental agency worked hard to ensure the narrative focused on the poachers, not the sharks. They emphasized the importance of protecting both the marine life and the people of Kapaa, highlighting the need for sustainable fishing practices and stricter enforcement of fishing regulations. In the aftermath, the village struggled to recover from the blows to its economy. Tourism took a temporary hit, but over time the story of Kapaa became one of resilience, not tragedy. The beaches reopened and visitors returned, drawn in by the village's commitment to preserving its natural beauty. Daniel, though forever marked by the loss of his father, continued his work as a marine biologist, advocating for the protection of marine ecosystems and raising awareness about the dangers of illegal poaching. In the end, Kalani's death had not been in vain. The waters around Kapaa began to heal, and the sharks, once lured in by greed, returned to their natural patterns. The village, though changed, endured, bound together by the knowledge that they had faced the threat and emerged stronger. An ambitious and gifted underwater photographer named Laura Bennett found herself off the coast of Komodo Island, Indonesia, in late 1991. A paradise and a mystery, the archipelago was renowned for its stunning coral reefs and plethora of marine life. Laura had long dreamed of capturing the rare creatures that lurked beneath its waters. The stretch where she chose to dive had a reputation for unpredictable currents and low visibility, but it was also home to some of the most elusive marine species. Despite the risks, she was determined to document the biodiversity that had drawn explorers and photographers worldwide for decades. Laura had spent years honing her craft, traveling from the frozen waters of the Arctic to the vibrant reefs of the Pacific. But Komodo presented a new challenge. She wasn't just here for the vibrant coral or colorful fish. She was after something unique, a critically endangered hawksbill sea turtle known to frequent these waters. It had become a personal mission for her. The year before, she had seen a fleeting glimpse of one, but the shot was out of focus, a rare failure in her otherwise flawless portfolio. This time she was determined to capture the perfect image. The early morning sun barely filtered through the choppy waters as she descended. Clad in a custom-made wetsuit and carrying her trusted underwater camera, Laura moved with practiced ease. She had hired a small local crew to assist him, but they remained on the boat, leaving her alone in the vast, silent expanse of the ocean. The water was colder than usual, and visibility was low, creating an eerie atmosphere. However, Laura was used to this condition and focused on her goal. After an hour of swimming through the reefs, she spotted a hawksbill sea turtle grazing on the coral below. Its shell glittered with intricate patterns that seemed to catch the faint light. Laura's heart raced. She carefully adjusted her camera to capture the turtle in all its glory. Her hands moved precisely, framing the shot in her mind before pressing the shutter. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The faint silhouette in the distance, however, was something Laura missed. The vibrations of her movements had attracted a giant tiger shark, which had been circling the area. It thought she was a wounded or feeble prey in the murky water. Her actions triggered the shark's hunting instinct as she moved to get a better angle. Being focused on her work, Laura was unaware of the enormous creature's approach. Then she felt a sudden change in current, and as she turned, she noticed the tiger shark staring at her from less than 10 feet away. She felt a panic attack, but her training soon took over. She knew that thrashing or sudden movements could agitate the shark even more. Using one hand to push herself away from the coral and the other to hold her camera, she attempted to slowly back away. It was too late, though. The shark lunged, perplexed by her silhouette and the low light. The camera was knocked out of her hands by the first impact. Laura attempted to defend herself by hitting the shark's nose. But the bite's force was too great. She felt her strength leaving her as the pain was sudden and intense. She gave a feeble kick, aware that her chances of surviving were diminishing. The predator appeared to be drawn to every movement. Her limbs felt heavy, and her vision blurred as she attempted to swim toward the surface. Laura's thoughts were not on the impending danger or the pain that consumed her body in those last moments as the world around her grew darker. Instead, her thoughts turned to the turtle, who continued to graze calmly on the reef below, oblivious to the violence nearby. Before the attack, she had taken one final picture of the turtle, a stunningly beautiful animal in its natural environment. She came for the shot, but her life would be at stake. Local fishermen who had been notified when Laura's crew did not hear from her discovered her body a few days later. Her camera was entangled in a patch of coral on the sea floor, which was still intact. When the photos were developed, they showed her last moments, a sequence of breathtaking pictures of the sea turtle, followed by hazy, disorganized shots of the incident. The final image, taken in a panic, only displayed ferocious water and shadow swirls. The tragedy rocked underwater photography. Known for her courage and dedication to capturing the beauty of the ocean, Laura was a well-respected individual. Her passing triggered a contentious discussion among marine biologists and other photographers concerning the morality of working in such hazardous conditions. Could the beauty of the ocean outweigh the perils that lurked beneath its surface? And was it worth risking one's life to pursue art? There was no simple solution for anyone who knew Laura. She had died doing what she loved, but the cost had been unimaginable. Her tragic and flawless last shot would always remind us of how fleeting life was beneath the waves. Tranquil yet luxurious North Ari Atoll located in the Maldives. The sun set over crystal-clear waters that stretched out endlessly into the horizon. It was a resort island, secluded and exclusive, where wealthy honeymooners and vacationers from around the globe came to escape the monotony of life. The island known as Kuramathi Isle was a stunning blend of white sands and lush palm trees, surrounded by vivid coral reefs and teeming marine life. Ava Harper, an American tourist in her mid-30s, had arrived at Kuramathi Isle with her sister Meryl for a much-needed vacation. Ava had insisted that they travel to avoid the stress of their everyday lives in Chicago after Meryl's recent tumultuous divorce. With its tropical setting, seclusion, and tranquility, Kuramathi seemed ideal for that. World-class facilities were available at the resort, and the staff was incredibly helpful. Everything had gone according to plan during the first few days. But then there was a tragedy. One of the things Ava would never forget happened on the fourth day of their visit. Just off the beach in one of the resort's designated safe zones, a honeymooning couple named Jared and Alara Voss had been snorkeling. The water glistened beneath the sun's golden rays as it rose. Ava had been half asleep in a beach chair when she heard the frantic splashing. Squinting at the water, she sat up and noticed Jared flailing wildly. Ilara, his wife, was yelling. Ava glimpsed a dark and ominous object amid the confusion. A shark, its dorsal fin clearly visible, tearing through the water at a terrifying pace. The water surrounding Jared turned red a short while later. It happened very quickly. Although it was already too late, resort employees hurried to remove Alara from the water and try to save Jared. The pristine beach was now marred by blood where his body had been dragged beneath. Tourists stood motionless on the beach, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed as shock swept through the air. The resort's management moved swiftly, but not in the manner one might anticipate. Citing routine maintenance and asserting that Jared had disregarded safety precautions by going too far out into the open ocean, they closed off the beach rather than publicly confronting the attack. The resort manager, a calm man named Elias Nevin, blamed Jared for his own negligence and declared it a tragic accident, which Ava overheard. The other guests were even led to believe that it might have been a freak accident that had nothing to do with a shark, possibly a simple slip on some jagged coral. However, Ava was aware of her observations. Without mentioning Jared's passing, the beach reopened the following day. It was not a monument, and there was no recognition. Ilara's cries of sorrow had been muffled behind closed doors, as she was also discreetly taken off the island. Ava felt uneasy about the entire circumstance. She was greatly satisfied with her ability to see things clearly. But she couldn't get rid of the feeling that this wasn't the first time something similar had occurred. Meryl was at the resort spa later that night, so Ava sneaked into the lobby to do some research. In its brochures and website, the resort boasted about the safety of its waters, strongly suggesting that shark sightings were uncommon and that the area was closely watched. However, Ava rejected it. She began making inquiries informally with the bartenders, the employees, and even some locals she had met while on a trip to a nearby island. Regarding the incident, everyone appeared uncomfortably silent. Ava does not start to piece together the truth until she meets a local fisherman named Dune. Kuramathi Isle had a dark past. Dune, a middle-aged man with deep-set eyes who spoke of experience, told her in low voices. A number of people have vanished over the years, primarily tourists who have gone diving or snorkeling in the nearby waters. The resort had always been able to hide it by blaming the victims themselves, claiming that they drowned or claiming that accidents were to blame. The shark population near the island has become abnormally aggressive in the past 10 years, Dune said, possibly as a result of illegal fishing methods that have upset the ecosystem. However, the resort refused to admit the issue because it was keen to keep up its image as a honeymooners' and vacationers' paradise. They instead silently compensated the bereaved families and removed all mention of the incidents from the public domain. Ava's spine tingled. Stopping now was not an option, even though she knew she was on a dangerous path. She resolved to confront Elias Nevin and uncover the cover-up, so she went back to the resort. But she quickly became aware that someone was observing her. Everywhere she went, resort employees appeared, and her room had been inexplicably broken into while she was away. This disturbed Ava, but it strengthened her determination. Ava chose to take a boat out to the deeper waters where Jared had been attacked the following day. She was curious to find out if the area was unique. Concerned for her sister's safety, Meryl pleaded with Ava to stop, but she persisted. To get away from the resort and be alone, she hired Dune to take her to the reef. The unusual scarcity of fish, as though the region had been abandoned by smaller marine life, caught Ava's attention as they circled the waters. Dune clarified that this was an indication that predators were close by. Ava suddenly noticed a big shadow beneath the boat, a shark. Before vanishing into the abyss, it made 2 full circles around them. Dune insisted that they return because he had had enough. However, Ava witnessed what she had to do. The resort was aware that the waters surrounding Kuramathi Island were unsafe. Ava went back to the island and stood up to Elias. She claimed that in order to safeguard the resort's earnings, he concealed the shark attacks, endangering more lives. Elias, who remained composed and calm, acknowledged it. Rather, he cautioned her that bringing such charges to light would destroy not only the resort, but also her. According to his implication, Ava wouldn't be the first to disappear if she put in too much effort, and the resort had strong connections. Ava sent an anonymous tip to a major news outlet before leaving the island that evening, with Meryl after realizing how dangerous she was. In the weeks that followed, the cover-up at Kuramathi Isle was revealed by an investigative report broadcast on international television. The resort experienced severe criticism lawsuits from relatives of the victims and a steep drop in visitors. Following Elias Nevins's disappearance, the Maldivian government opened a formal investigation into the resort's operations. Ava's life was forever altered by what she had discovered, and she returned to Chicago. She had traveled to the Maldives in search of tranquility, but instead she had discovered a fatal secret that had claimed lives. The paradise that Kuramathi Isle had promised was merely a front for the perils that were hiding beneath it. And Ava would always remember that there is a cost to paradise. In the summer of 1992, Port Hardy, a small seaside town in British Columbia, was tucked away on the rocky northern tip of Vancouver Island. The city has long been a refuge for beachgoers, fishermen, and outdoor lovers due to its close-knit community and scenic beauty. The chilly Pacific waters, however, had a sinister reputation beneath their picturesque surface. Reports of shark sightings, especially of the great white variety, had been made periodically over the years. Despite this, the locals were rarely alarmed, dismissing the sightings as the result of fanciful stories told by fishermen or the sporadic appearance of a predator far from its typical hunting grounds. The kind of man who could make any gathering laugh was Sam Holloway, a beloved local. Sam, who was nearly 300 pounds in weight and 6 feet tall, had a personality that was as big as his size. He was always the first to joke around, and one could hear his deep laugh from the other side of the beach. Sam chose to partake in one of his favorite activities, a lazy float on the water, on this particular day following a lengthy afternoon barbecue with friends. The scene was ideal. As families packed up their things and kids played in the shallow water, the beach was bathed in a warm glow from the low sun. Sam went to the shoreline after grabbing an inflatable air mattress from his truck and a bright blue and yellow raft that had seen a lot of use over the years. With his typical smile, he waved to a few friends occupied with cleaning up after the barbecue. The chilly sea nipped at his feet as he waded into the water and gingerly ascended onto the inflated mattress. A light breeze from the sea blew through the cool air. Sam relaxed, shut his eyes, and let the soft current draw him out. So the steady sound of the waves crashing against the mattress lulled him into a sound sleep. The tide was turning, but Sam didn't realize it. He was carried farther and farther from the shore by the water, as the afternoon turned to early evening due to the erratic currents in this area of Vancouver Island. The once welcoming beach was now just afar off on the horizon. Sam was still blissfully oblivious, snoring softly as his big body stretched out on the floating mattress. The sea became cold, and the surroundings beneath him altered as he moved farther out into the open waters. This region of the Pacific was renowned for its abundant marine life. Schools of fish, sea lions, and seals freely swam in the chilly depths. But where there was prey, there was also a predator. And the top predator in these waters was the great white shark. A dark silhouette slid silently beneath the surface miles from shore. When a large female great white, who was more than 15 feet long, sensed something else, she stopped pursuing a school of seals. She had been interested in Sam because of the vibrations coming from his mattress and his sporadic movements. Inquisitive but cautious, she was a predator. Sam was still half asleep when he stirred a little, but something wasn't right. As his floating mattress rocked softly, an odd feeling of unease started to seep into his thoughts. Squinting against the waning sunlight, he opened his eyes and blinked. It took him a moment to realize how far he had drifted and how little he could see of the far shore now. Even though panic hadn't yet struck, he could feel an increasing unease eating away at the edges of his awareness. And then it happened. When a sudden strong shock shook the mattress, Sam became terrified. His heart was racing in his chest as he sat up straight. For a brief instant, nothing moved. He glanced at the surrounding water, but all he could see were the soft, placid waves. Perhaps a fish or a piece of driftwood had brushed against the mattress, he told himself, trying to dispel the idea that it was all in his head. But he was hit by another powerful shock before he could calm down. Sam had to hold on to the edges of the mattress to prevent himself from falling into the water, because it was tilting dangerously. He saw it then, and a vast shadow moved just below the surface, slowly circling him. He felt his blood cool. Sam had never given the tales or rumors about sharks in these waters much thought. He began to panic now that he was confronted with the indisputable facts. His big frame made the mattress wobble dangerously as he frantically tried to paddle with his hands. It appeared that every motion disturbed the creature beneath him. No longer intrigued, the shark was aware of the presence above. It was in hunting mode now. This prominent, sluggish figure on the water's surface was prey in the predator's mind, just like a distressed fish or a stranded seal. As it approached, the water surface was broken by its dorsal fin. When Sam saw the fin slicing through the water a few feet away, his heart began to race. He paddled more forcefully but lacked coordination because his panic prevented him from thinking clearly. Already wobbly under his weight, the mattress abruptly swung to the side, sending Sam into the freezing water. There was silence for a short, horrifying instant. Sam was struggling to stay afloat when the shock of the cold water took his breath away. He was exposed and at risk when the inflatable mattress sank just out of reach. His movements were erratic and desperate as he thrashed in the water. When the shark sensed Sam's frantic movements, it struck with terrifying speed. With its strong jaws clamping down on Sam's leg, it rose from below. It was instantaneous and unfathomable. Sam screamed, but the sound was lost in the vast ocean surrounding him. There were still some beachgoers on the far shore who had noticed the disturbance. Although they could not do much, they could see Sam struggling in the water in the distance. Though it was too late, someone fled for assistance. The water surrounding Sam turned red in a matter of minutes. He was pulled beneath the surface by the shark, which was motivated by its instincts. His flailing slowed, and the sea became silent again. All that was left when rescuers arrived was the deflated mattress floating aimlessly in the water. The man with the contagious laugh and jokes, Sam Holloway, was no longer there. The shark had gone deep with him, never to be seen again. The tragedy rocked the small town of Port Hardy, and within days word of it had spread well beyond its boundaries. After being picked up by news outlets, the story of the 300-pound man who was attacked by a shark while sleeping on an inflatable mattress quickly went viral. Friends and family were left to deal with the unexpected loss, and the strange and terrible nature of the incident made their grief even worse. The tale would be recounted over and over for years, and Sam Holloway's last moments would serve as a terrifying reminder of the perils that could lurk beneath the surface of even the calmest waters. The Albatross II, a small fishing trawler that had spent years navigating the rich waters of the Pacific Ocean, was battered by the sun on its deck in the summer of 1998, on the rocky coast of Baja California, Mexico. Tom Miller, a seasoned fisherman with over 30 years of seafaring experience, led the crew as they concluded yet another exhausting day of yellowfin tuna catching. Having grown up in the seaside town of San Felipe, Miller had a profound respect for ocean mysteries and their creatures. His crew believed in him because they knew his instincts were usually correct. On that particular day, though, Miller noticed something strange. A few miles from the coast, he saw movement close to the water surface as the Albatross II drifted, somewhat struggling and flailing in the waves. Through the use of his binoculars, he was able to discern the outline of a giant sea turtle that was entangled in a pile of abandoned fishing nets. The turtle was slowly drowning despite its desperate attempts to free itself. Miller commanded the crew to cut the engines and lower the small dinghy without hesitation. His first mate, Ignacio Nacho Valdez, expressed concern about what he was planning to do. Hammerhead sharks were known to inhabit the waters off Baja, and the ideal time of year for feeding was the late summer. Miller, however, ignored the warning and concentrated only on the distressing turtle. He believed too many animals perished in these waters due to human carelessness. He could at least save this one. The scene was oddly peaceful as he slipped into the water. The waves bathed in a golden glow from the sun. The water felt cool against Miller's skin as he swam in its direction. As he arrived at the trapped animal, his knife, a reliable partner on all his fishing excursions, shone in his hand. As Miller cautiously started slicing away the nylon netting wrapped around the turtle's neck and flippers, its terrified eyes fixed on him. Miller was unaware that the struggling turtle's agitation had attracted unwelcome attention. A hammerhead shark had been circling in the shadowy depths below. Even though hammerhead sharks, distinguished by their characteristic T-shaped heads, were typically not hostile toward people, their hunting instincts were aroused by the splashing and the smell of marine life. It thought the frantic motions were prey. The crew was anxiously watching Miller's efforts to free the turtle above the surface. Just as he cut the last tangle of the net away, the hammerhead struck. Without warning, the shark lunged, its mighty jaws clamping down on Miller's leg. A cry of agony reverberated throughout the water, and the Albatross II crew froze in shock. Nacho reacted first. Fear had taken over, but he snatched up a harpoon and yelled for the others to lower the dinghy. The shark bit again, severing muscle and bone. Miller's breath came in ragged gasps as he fought to stay afloat, and blood hazed the water. Now free, the turtle swam away from the mayhem, oblivious to the tragedy behind it. By the time Nacho and another deckhand, Javier, had reached the site in the dinghy, it was too late. Miller's face was pale from blood loss, and he was hardly conscious. Although they could bring him on board, the damage had already been done. The shark vanished into the depths, leaving nothing but a whirlpool of blood. To save him, Miller's crew exerted every effort. Although the closest hospital was hours away, they attempted to keep him conscious by using tourniquets and radioing for emergency help. The bite had severed a major artery, and despite their efforts, Tom Miller died before they reached the shore. His death rocked the small fishing community of San Felipe. Tom had been a hero in the community and was admired for his leadership, compassion, and prowess on the water. When word of his untimely death spread, the tale of the rescue mission gone wrong soon became the talk in Baja California. Some criticized him for venturing into shark-infested waters without the necessary safety gear, while others celebrated him as a hero who had paid the ultimate price for his altruism. Following Miller's passing, local fishermen and environmentalists engaged in contentious discussions. Some claimed that more stringent procedures in hazardous waters should be implemented to rescue operations involving marine life. Others thought that Miller was a victim of the ocean's unpredictability and had just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The incident also spurred discussions concerning the expanding issue of abandoned fishing nets or ghost nets, which threatened marine life long after being discarded. His friends and family memorialized Tom Miller's story in the months following his death. To honor his memory, a small plaque was erected at the harbor in San Felipe, where the Albatross II was docked. Tom Miller, whose bravery and love of the ocean would never be forgotten, was remembered on the plaque. Miller's legacy endured despite his brief life. His death served as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of the ocean, but also of the compassion that drove him to act no matter the cost. His crewmates, especially Nacho, continued to fish the waters off Baja California, but they never forgot the lesson they had learned that fateful day. Mia Chen was a bright marine biology student who ended up far from home in San Diego, California, in the summer of 1994. Her investigation had led her to the pristine waters surrounding a remote reef off the Fijian coast, more precisely close to the island of Vanuatu. The region was perfect for marine research because it had remained primarily unaltered by human activity, and was renowned for its biodiversity and pristine coral structures. Making the most of her grant to investigate how climate change affected coral bleaching was Mia's top priority. The reef had long piqued the interest of marine biologists and was referred to locally as Tavoro's Garden, a reference to a Fijian myth about a sea demon. Its remote location and intricate underwater terrain made it a problematic workplace and a research goldmine. Numerous sharks and other marine life species could be found in the deep waters with abrupt drops into the abyss. However, the locals had frequently warned of the risks of diving in the area by yourself. Mia, like many scientists, was motivated by curiosity and a desire to leave her mark. One day, Mia got ready for her third solo dive of the week. The water was unusually still and reflected the midday sun like a mirror in the calm weather. As usual, she had prepared her dive carefully, setting up her gear and checking her oxygen levels twice. Mia chose to go deeper to collect information on the coral beds on the reef while her colleagues, positioned on a nearby boat, were performing surface-level water tests. The drop was familiar and easy. The water felt like a second home to Mia, who had spent years perfecting her diving techniques. The coral's vivid hues and schools of tiny fish darting in and out of the structures welcomed her as she descended farther. She took her time carefully documenting her project data and taking pictures. For the first 20 minutes of the dive, everything appeared normal. Then something occurred. It began as a faint change in the water that she could not identify. Mia initially believed the movement to be the ocean current's natural ebb and flow, but it felt more intentional. She stopped and lingered, looking around her for a while. She could see far into the blue beyond the reef because of the excellent visibility. Then she caught sight of a shadow in the distance. Circulating was the reef shark, a streamlined and nimble predator typical of these waters. Mia wasn't worried at first. Being a marine biologist, she was aware of shark behavior. The 6-foot-long shark appeared more inquisitive than hostile. The distance between them gradually shrank as it swam in lazy arcs. Mia observed it objectively, taking note of its dimensions and motion. She had already come into contact with sharks during dives, so there wasn't much to be concerned about as long as she kept calm and didn't agitate it. But the shark started acting differently as the minutes went by. It began to move more erratically and encircled Mia more closely. The electronic pulses from her equipment and presence caught its attention. Mia began to become tense. She was sufficiently knowledgeable about shark behavior to identify the warning indications of increased curiosity, which could indicate an impending attack. Mia started up slowly, taking care to avoid any abrupt movements. She continued to watch the shark while her heartbeat accelerated. The shark's body language shifted from curiosity to predatoriness as it followed her. It was now tracking her, not just looking. When the shark swooped closer, its sleek body moving at frightening speed, she was still about 30 feet below the surface. With more frantic movements, Mia kicked away out of instinct. Sensing her fear, the shark retaliated accordingly. It brushed her leg with its muzzle as it made a swift pass. Despite her sudden panic, Mia continued to move. She was only a few feet away from the surface. But suddenly, the shark attacked. Mia barely had time to respond because it happened so quickly. The shark's strong jaws closed on her leg, causing pain in her body as the bite struck. She flailed in an attempt to escape, but the shark's hold was unyielding. As the water surrounding her became hazy with blood, Mia knew she would not survive. Although they had been monitoring her progress, her boatmates were too far away to witness the precise moment of the attack. They knew something had gone wrong when her equipment abruptly stopped transmitting. When they finally made it to the scene, they discovered nothing but Mia's buoyancy vest and a piece of her ripped wetsuit floating on the water's surface. She had vanished from view. Local officials, marine specialists, and even the Fijian Navy participated in the extensive search initiated in the following days. However, Mia's body was never found. Her disturbing underwater camera footage, discovered embedded in the coral, was the only evidence of her. The shark circling the desperate climb and the unexpected rush of chaos were all captured in the video, which captured her last moments. Mia's passing rocked the marine biology community. She was recognized as a rising star for her commitment and enthusiasm toward marine conservation. The event generated a contentious discussion regarding the safety of solitary dives, particularly in isolated and unpredictably changing areas. Many questioned whether stricter safety regulations should have been implemented and what procedures should be in place for researchers in such settings. Mia Chen's death devastated her co-workers, especially her mentor, Dr. Zayden Keller. Thanks to Dr. Keller, Mia's grant had mainly been secured, and he held himself accountable for not demanding more stringent safety measures. After the tragedy, he lobbied for reforms in marine research, particularly in shark-populated waters. His work ultimately resulted in the Mia Chen Memorial Fund, which awarded grants for marine research focusing on risk mitigation and safety. Although the waters surrounding Tevaro's garden were still stunning and enigmatic, the memory of Mia's terrible demise tarnished them. The actual threat was much more accurate for the scientific community, a constant reminder of the dangers associated with venturing into the unknown. But locals still told tales of the sea demon that haunted the waters. The year was 1996. Henry Parker had always felt at home in the water. He was a 35-year-old man with years of experience swimming and gliding through oceans worldwide. Though he had visited a section of South Africa's coastline since his early 20s, it was still his favorite location. False Bay was a well-known beach because of its clear waters and the striking Hottentots Holland Mountains in the background. It was also known for occasionally seeing sharks, especially great whites. But like many of the locals who were experienced swimmers, Henry had become accustomed to the risks of the ocean. Despite his respect for the sea, he had no fear of it. Nearing the beginning of the South African summer, the sun had started to set, and the water took on an orange hue. Because of the calmer beach and softer light, Henry had always liked swimming in the late afternoon. He had arrived that evening accompanied by a few friends he had made at the neighborhood swimming club. They were all gathered on the beach, some wading into the shallows and others relaxing on towels. Henry dove deeper first, excited to feel the cool water on his skin as usual. Simonstown had a long maritime history and was close to the beach. The locals frequently shared legends about shipwrecks and marine life, adding to the bay's enigma. Given the abundance of seals along its rocky shores, False Bay was known to serve as a breeding ground for great white sharks. Sharks were frequently seen there, but despite the dangers, surfers, swimmers, and tourists found refuge in the area because of its beauty. Attacks had occurred in the past, but they were so uncommon that most people didn't consider them until it was too late. The water was remarkably calm that night. Appreciating the solitude, Henry swam farther out than usual. Everything seemed serene, including the soft swells, the distant seabird calls, and the steady pull of the tides. He spent some time floating on his back while gazing up at the sky, which was changing from gold to a deep purple. Little figures could be seen on the horizon as his friends continued to converse on the shore. Even though Henry was by himself, he didn't feel isolated. He had always been with the ocean, but something changed as the sun went down. He sensed a change in the water beneath him before seeing it. In the beginning, it was only a slight tug on his leg. He dismissed it as an occasional occurrence when swimming in open water a current. However, the tug returned more substantial this time, followed by a sharp pain. Henry initially believed he had cut his leg on some underwater debris, possibly a piece of coral or a sharp rock. But when he glanced down, he saw the unmistakable silhouette of a great white shark. Panic surged through him. The shark was massive, at least 15 feet long, and its dorsal fin cut through the water like a knife. In the fading light, the creature seemed to materialize from the depths, its dark eyes fixed on Henry. He kicked hard, trying to free himself, but the shark's grip was relentless. Blood began to cloud the water around him, and with it came the realization that he was in serious trouble. From the shore, his friends had noticed something was wrong. At first, they thought Henry was just messing around. He was known for being playful in the water, sometimes pretending to struggle to get a rise out of people. But as they watched, it became clear that this was no joke. Oliver Voss grabbed a pair of binoculars from his beach bag and focused on Henry's distant thrashing form. That's when he saw the fin. Oliver yelled at the others, but they were helpless. None of them were strong enough swimmers to reach Henry in time. And even if they were, what could they do? The shark was enormous, and the growing darkness made the scene harder to make out. They could only watch in horror as the water churned and Henry's struggles became more frantic. Henry fought with everything he had, but the shark was relentless. It pulled him under its powerful jaws, clamping down on his leg with bone-crushing force. He managed to resurface, gasping for air, but the shark struck again, dragging him deeper. Henry's thoughts raced in those final moments as the cold water closed in around him and the light above grew dimmer. He had always known the risks and told himself to be careful that it wouldn't happen to him, but now he was alone in the water, facing what he had never truly believed would come for him. On the shore, his friends could do nothing but call for help. By the time a rescue boat arrived, it was too late. The water where Henry had been was stained red, and there was no sign of him. As silently as it had entered, the shark had vanished, slipping back into the depths. The community was shocked in the days that followed. The town was affected by Henry's passing because False Bay was a well-liked destination for both residents and visitors. Once renowned for its beauty, the beach suddenly gained notoriety. In an attempt to share the tale of the seasoned swimmer killed by a great white shark, reporters flocked to Simonstown. In response, local authorities tightened security. Lifeguards received further training in shark monitoring and emergency response, and signs alerting people to shark activity were posted along the beach. Some locals demanded the installation of shark nets, while others maintained that sharks, not people, owned the ocean. Despite the heated debate, the town ultimately adopted a more cautious stance. Although the beach was still accessible, there were more stringent guidelines about swimming during specific hours of the day, especially after sunset when sharks were known to hunt. Henry Parker's passing served as a reminder of the unpredictable nature of the ocean and the precarious equilibrium between beauty and danger that existed in locations such as False Bay. Oliver, in particular, was troubled by what he had seen. Because they couldn't get the memory of those last moments out of their minds, many stopped swimming in the ocean in the following months. The sea, formerly serene and joyful, had become dreadful. Ultimately, Henry's story became a warning. False Bay's breathtaking views and crystal-clear waters continued to draw visitors, but they were more cautious. After all, people who ventured too far from shore did so at their own risk, because the ocean was never really tamed. It was a wild place, full of life and death. In the summer of 2008, both residents and visitors swarmed the beaches of the Western Cape region of South Africa. Mossel Bay, a seaside town renowned for its breathtaking vistas and immaculate waters, has developed into a major venue for open-water swimming events. Cape Town native Rachel Venter, a professional swimmer, had been a regular presence in these waters for a long time. Over time, she had established herself as one of the nation's best open-water swimmers. However, something unthinkable happened on that fateful day as she got ready for yet another swim. Adventurers and thrill-seekers had long flocked to Mossel Bay. Rachel slipped into the water after adjusting her goggles as the summer sun pounded the bay. She was swimming as part of her preparation for an impending competition, and it was a routine swim. Unaware that they were going to see something frightful, the crowd gathered along the shoreline, enjoying the afternoon. With the strength and grace she had developed over years of focused training, Rachel's body sliced through the waves as she moved fluidly through the water. But there was a stir beneath the surface. Sharks patrolled these waters, and Rachel had always known about them. The dangers were known to her. An almost 5-meter-long great white, however, swam closer to the coast than usual on this particular day. Sharks typically stayed away from people, but this one seemed different, almost agitated. The predator's enormous jaws suddenly closed around Rachel's leg with terrifying force as it leaped upward from the depths. The assault was brutal and quick and ended in a matter of seconds as the shark went back into the deep. The water surrounding Rachel turned crimson as her screams shattered the atmosphere. On the beach, panic broke out. She was already damaged when rescue crews and lifeguards rushed to her aid. The shark disappeared back into the depths as swiftly as it had appeared. Rachel was hauled from the water, her leg ripped and gushing blood, barely conscious. Her professional swimming career was in ruins, but she lived. She would always carry the emotional and physical scars. After several weeks, Rachel withdrew into herself. The athlete who had once been lively and self-assured was now overcome with fear and plagued by attack-related nightmares. The doctors had told her she was lucky to be alive, but Rachel didn't feel lucky. Every time she looked at her scarred leg, she was reminded of the creature lurking beneath the surface, waiting for the next victim. But something else troubled her. The shark's behavior had been odd. Why had it come so close to shore? Why had it attacked with such aggression? Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. She began to research shark attacks in the area. She discovered a disturbing trend. Incidents of shark aggression had been increasing not just in Mossel Bay, but all along South Africa's southern coast. Determined to find answers, she reached out to a local marine biologist, Dr. Cale van Rooyen. Cale, a quiet and reflective man with a deep passion for marine conservation, had been studying shark behavior for over 2 decades. He had noticed the same pattern but had struggled to find a concrete explanation. Rachel and Cale began to investigate together. They combed through data on shark populations' migration patterns and environmental changes. It wasn't long before they uncovered something alarming. A series of underwater construction projects had been underway for the past few years. Companies were building massive tunnels to transport natural gas from offshore rigs to the mainland. These underwater structures, though necessary for the energy industry, were disrupting marine ecosystems in ways that no one had anticipated. The tunnels emitted low-frequency sound vibrations that traveled for miles through the water. The sharks were confused by these noises and moved closer to the coast in pursuit of food or safety. They were becoming more hostile and likely to attack because the very existence of these structures was changing their innate behavior. Clearly, Rachel and Cale needed to take action. The construction companies, backed by powerful investors, were unlikely to halt their projects without significant pressure. The two of them began gathering evidence, conducting interviews with local fishermen, and documenting the changes in shark behavior. Rachel, still struggling with her trauma, found that the search for answers gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She would never swim professionally again, but she could still make a difference. After months of research, Rachel and Cale presented their findings to the local government. The hearings were tense. Representatives from the construction companies argued that the tunnels were essential for the region's economic growth. But the evidence was clear. Unless something were done to mitigate the impact of these projects, shark attacks would continue, putting countless lives at risk. In the end, the government was forced to reevaluate the construction plans. New regulations were put in place to minimize the disruption to marine life, and several of the most harmful projects were scaled back. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Rachel, though still scarred, had found a way to move forward. Though she would never race through the water again, she reclaimed her strength differently. The ocean, once her greatest love and greatest fear, had become her cause. Bolinas, nestled between the jagged cliffs of Marin County and the turbulent Pacific Ocean, had long been a secret haven for surfers looking for uncrowded waves outside Southern California. Fishing, surfing, and the sporadic storms that tore through the town's shores were all integral parts of its past. However, a change had occurred in the previous several months. People in the area had become increasingly uneasy after several reports of shark sightings near the Point Reyes National Seashore. But Jamie Summers, 17, was not one to be easily put off. Jamie, who had grown up surfing these waters, was tall, lanky, and had a mop of sun-bleached hair. Maybe he was overconfident in reading the ocean and avoiding danger. Jamie dismissed the warning when it was announced that surfers should avoid the water because shark activity had increased. He was more excited about riding the best waves of the season than afraid of what might be beneath the surface. The sun had just risen that morning, and the horizon was glowing a gentle pink. A unique surf session was promised by the glassy water and the precise way the waves were rolling in. Jamie picked up his board and started down the rocky, winding path to the beach. The typical surfer crowd was conspicuously missing because the advisory deterred even the most experienced wave riders. However, Jamie saw a chance here. When he was by himself, he could enjoy the ocean. His arms moving in a rhythmic motion through the water as he paddled out was meditative. The waves' roar and the seagull's sporadic squawk were the only sounds in the early morning silence. The ocean appeared serene yet alive, beckoning him to venture into its depths. Unaware that someone else was observing from below, he sat up on his board and looked to the horizon for the next set of waves. A giant bull shark lurked beneath the surface. Bull sharks were infamous for their violent nature and propensity to swim near the coast, even in shallow waters. Warmer water temperatures were blamed for the recent increase in sightings as they attracted more of these predators to Bolinas. Jamie was unaware of the danger rapidly approaching because he was too preoccupied with the waves. The splashing of his hands and feet, which resembled the motions of a wounded fish, attracted the shark as he paddled to retrieve the next swell. The predator's muscular, streamlined body sliced through the water with terrifying accuracy as it zeroed in. Jamie experienced an abrupt, sharp pain that exploded in his right leg halfway through his paddle. Although his mind was racing to process what had happened, the pain was overwhelming and instantaneous. The shark's jaws had clamped down on his calf and Jamie was dragged under as it thrashed. He kicked frantically in an attempt to escape as panic shot through him. Gasping for air, he surfaced, but the surrounding water had turned a murky, dark red. His board was no longer attached to his foot and was floating aimlessly close by. The shark returned in a circle, its dark outline just below the surface. Jamie tried to swim, but his injured leg was useless. The salt water stung the open wound, and each movement sent waves of pain shooting through his body. He was aware that he was in danger. It seemed impossible to reach the shore, and no one was nearby to call for assistance. With its powerful body rushing upward, the shark reappeared. Jamie was struck again, this time by the predator's jaws tearing into his side. The battle was brutal, short, and without hope. He tried desperately to repel the attack, but the wounds were too great. His strength diminished as the shark pulled him under the water one last time. Jamie had previously found happiness and freedom in the ocean, but now it had taken him. Mateo Valdez, a local fisherman who had been out gathering bait close to the rocks, found his body when it washed up on the shore later that afternoon. The first indication that something was seriously amiss was the sight of Jamie's broken surfboard drifting aimlessly in the shallows. The tragedy quickly rocked the small town of Bolinas after the authorities were called. Jamie Summers' passing rocked the surfing community. He was popular and well known for his love of the sea and his spirit of adventure. However, his premature death provoked a heated discussion about safety in dangerous waters. Surfers should respect the ocean's unpredictable nature, particularly in regions where shark activity is known to occur. Others believed that Jamie had died doing what he loved, and that the excitement and love of surfing outweighed the danger. The beach at Bolinas was eerily quiet in the days after the attack. Few dared to venture outside even though the waves were still perfect and inviting. During a memorial service for Jamie, surfers from all over the coast came to show their support. Flowers, candles, and notes were scattered across the beach as a temporary shrine to the boy who had lived and died by the sea. The loss was heartbreaking for Jamie's family. His parents, Robert and Elaine Summers, advocated for improved regulations and warnings in areas known to be shark-infested. They also accepted that their son had gone too soon. Jamie had been motivated by a deep and perilous love for the ocean. Ultimately, the tale of Jamie Summers turned into a warning. Although his love of surfing was evident, it served as a reminder that even the most accomplished and self-assured people were susceptible to the erratic effects of nature. Even though the ocean was beautiful and powerful, it could suddenly turn deadly. Guadalupe's surrounding Pacific waters were crystal clear on the morning of September 12, 2024. Situated 150 miles off the coast of Baja California, Mexico, the island has gained a reputation as one of the world's top locations for up-close encounters with great white sharks. Adventurers had been seeking the excitement of coming into contact with these enormous predators from the safety of reinforced metal cages for decades. For such expeditions, the island's rocky cliffs and abundant marine life provided the perfect backdrop. World-famous adventure photographer Mike Hall and his fiancée Sarah Reynolds were on board the Isla Explorer, a special ship built for diving tours on that fateful day. Mike had envisioned the trip as an opportunity to use his camera to document the unadulterated beauty of the ocean's top predator. Reluctantly, Sarah had consented, more because she loved Mike than because she was particularly interested in sharks. She had never been at ease with animals that had too many teeth, and great whites had a reason to make her uneasy. A few tourists and researchers who were all excited to feel the excitement of diving with sharks joined them. The cage diving adventure had started just like any other. 2 strong steel cages, each intended to give divers a secure viewing platform, had been lowered into the water by the Isla Explorer's crew. The great white sharks circled the cages with an odd mixture of curiosity and indifference, attracted by the smell of chum in the water. Mike was at his best with his camera in hand. He skillfully navigated inside the cage and took picture after picture of the sharks as they silently moved through the water. While her heart thumped in her chest, Sarah clung to the side of the cage. Her heartbeat quickened each time one of the sharks approached, reminding herself of the strength of the cage and the innumerable divers who had come back safely from similar experiences. She tried to concentrate on her breathing. However, there was something different about the sharks' movements that day. They seemed more frantic and agitated. Once serene, the water now appeared to be churning with a faint but increasing tension. The biggest shark surfaced from the depths as the hours went by. Over 18 feet long and covered in scars, this enormous great white was a veteran of innumerable underwater combats. As they observed from the boat, the crew recognized it right away. They called it El Matador, and it was a common visitor to these waters, which were renowned for their size and viciousness. The shark moved slowly and deliberately toward the cages, staring at the divers inside with its black eyes. In pursuit of the ideal shot, Mike leaned closer and placed his camera between the bars of the cage. Mike was too preoccupied to notice Sarah cautiously nudging him as her sense of dread grew. He had photographed dangerous animals for his career, so this was another opportunity to get a unique shot. The shark lunged abruptly and unexpectedly. Unlike the others, this method wasn't slow and was curious. With startling force, El Matador pressed its enormous head against the cage, causing the steel bars to groan. Even though Sarah screamed and automatically moved away, Mike didn't move, keeping his camera up to his face. The cage trembled as another even more powerful blow came. The boat's crew let out a shout, but the water and the growing panic below drowned out their voices. The unthinkable occurred in a matter of seconds when the shark's strong jaws clamped down on the bars, bending and twisting them like wire. The cage gave way before anyone could react. As the shark's head poked through the opening and its teeth flashed in the faint underwater light, Sarah's mind froze in fear. Mike didn't have time to get out of the cage because he was stuck against the side. In order to pull him from the cage and into the open water, the shark's jaws closed around him. Sarah found the subsequent scene to be a blur. She recalled the surface screams, the waters rushing, and seeing Mike's body vanish in a cloud of blood. Moments later, the crew dragged her out of the cage, but she was barely conscious, shock numbing her mind. The shark had made its meal, which meant that Mike could not be traced, as the shark had disappeared into the deep. The only thing left was a memory. Sarah was in a daze for days following the attack, unable to comprehend what had transpired. After Mike left, she had been powerless, stuck in a nightmare from which she was unable to escape. Media outlets swooped down on the story like vultures. The shark cage tragedy and the fatal breach were widely reported. Still, none of the stories adequately conveyed the horror Sarah had seen. They made Mike a martyr of adventure, a man who had given his all for his passion. For Sarah, however, the situation was much more nuanced. Not only had something gone terribly wrong with the shark that day, but she also couldn't get rid of the feeling that cage diving as a whole had failed. The world moved on over the next few weeks, but Sarah was unable to. Then she went back to Isla Guadalupe on a chilly October morning. This time she arrived by herself, resolved to face the sea and the memories it evoked. She was instantly identified by the Isla Explorer crew, who expressed their sympathy and advised her not to return to the water. For condolences, Sarah wasn't present, though. She needed to comprehend. In an attempt to piece together what had happened, she spoke with shark experts and marine biologists for hours. According to some theories, the shark may have been startled by the camera lens's reflection and thought it was prey. Some hypothesized that the increased chum in the water had exacerbated the shark's aggression. Sarah wasn't satisfied with any of the explanations, though. She ultimately realized that she might never be able to learn the whole truth. Sarah found a tiny bit of peace while standing on the deck of the Isla Explorer and gazing out at the vast blue ocean. No amount of human meddling could completely control the creatures that lived in the vast and unpredictable sea. In a sense, Mike had been drawn to the ocean, which he had loved. However, neither she nor the shark were at fault. When they entered its domain, they both accepted the risk. Sarah felt lighter as the boat resumed its journey to the mainland. Although the guilt had started to lessen, the grief would never go away. She had confronted her fears and the ocean, and while she didn't have all the answers, she had enough to continue.